And now, please welcome to the stage a man you're familiar with if you've seen his TV show, The Glazov Gang. He is also the editor of Front Page magazine, and he holds a PhD in history with a specialty in foreign policy. He's the author of the critically acclaimed and best-selling book, United in Hate, The Left's Romance with Tyranny and Terror. Please welcome here this evening, Dr. Jamie Glazov.
Ladies and gentlemen, the picture you see up on the screen is a picture of my father. We come from the former evil empire, the Soviet Union. My father put his life on the line against the Soviet regime, so did my mother. My father, when he was a little boy, at a very young age, realized that he lived in a slave camp, and he put his life on the line to fight that evil regime. I can't speak about all this today. I have to talk about a few other things, but I want to at least give you a taste and an understanding of where I'm coming from, because my parents put their lives on the line against the evil empire. Part of what happened is they taught us Christianity, and the KGB persecuted us for that and many other things. And we got out, and we were very lucky we got out, and we ended up in the United States of America. And when I was 5.5 years old, when I landed in America, even though I did not intellectually understand, I understood with my heart what freedom was. And I just want to do something for a moment. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for having me here. I love this country, and I don't want to see the transformation of the United States of America, as some people do. I want America to stay the way that it is, and I put my life on the line to fight the forces that are trying to destroy this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my background, and with the time that I have, I want to discuss a few things with you. First of all, I'm so sick and tired over the years of watching TV and nobody asks the right questions, nobody says the right thing, and I finally said, I'm going to ask the questions that need to be asked. Please come up afterwards and get my card. I have a TV show called The Glazov Gang, and I have Robert Spencer, Mark Dury, Dinesh D'Souza, many people on my show to get to the bottom of the issues of where we're discussing. Come and get my card from me. I want to start on a certain note, actually. Ladies and gentlemen, the way that the Unholy Alliance operates, the left and Islam, totalitarian movements, sociopaths, psychopaths. And you know what they do? We have them in our own lives. When they punch you in the face, you got to say you're sorry. You have to apologize, because victims are perpetrators and perpetrators are victims. Let me tell you something. I'm called a racist and an Islamophobe every day. But I spend most of my life, much of my life, standing up for Muslim women, Muslim girls that are the victims of Islamic gender apartheid. I know their names. I live with their names and their faces in my heart every day. I'm getting sick and tired of the people who don't care about their own people in their faith that are persecuted by Islam and Sharia, lecturing me and calling me names, whereas the fact is that they are allowing their ideology and the people that enforce it to persecute their people and, of course, non-believers. I want to stress one thing. How the left operates and how Islam operates is when when people are following Islamic ideology. See how the left has set this up? They're brilliant in how it's set it up. If female genital mutilation is being perpetrated, right now what we see what ISIS is doing in Iraq. Today, as you know, they're taking over northern Iraq. Christians are being butchered. The Sunnis are killing Shia. When we try to bring attention to these things, oh, Jamie, why do you hate Muslims? Not all Muslims are terrorists. This is their card. They play this constantly, and it is false. It is BS. It is a propaganda game that they play. And the thing is that when we point to these problems, we are not pointing to all Muslim people. There are many good people everywhere. I love Muslim people. Robert Spencer, Nani Darwish, and Brigitte Gabriel, and David Horowitz, and Daniel Pipes, and Frank Gaffney, they all do. Our problem is with Islamic ideology and the people who are following it. That's the problem. We are not demonizing all Muslim people, and the moment you take that away from them, they have nothing to offer. So let me begin. Aqsa Parvez, 16-year-old Muslim girl. I live with her every day in my heart. She's from Toronto. I've talked to so many Muslims who are defending Islam and say this has nothing to do with Islam, but they've never even heard of her, and they don't care. 16 years old, suffocated by her father and her brother, murdered because she wanted to live a Western lifestyle. She wanted to be free. Obama says that Muslim women have the right to veil. Okay, I think the problem is that our president and everyone should stand up for all people having the right not to veil and not to have acid thrown in their face and not to have physical violence perpetrated on them. And let me tell you, this is how Aqsa is remembered today in Ontario by her family. She never existed. It's simply called Plot 774, and it's out in a field somewhere. Pamela Geller, who's considered or labeled or slandered by the enemy, by the left, by the Unholy Alliance. She's called an Islamophobe and a racist and everything you want to call her. But I will tell you something. She's a hero, because out of everyone and out of all the Muslims in the world following Sharia, defending Sharia, Pamela Geller made she made a memorial grove for Aqsa Parvez, for a young girl. She couldn't do it in Ontario because the family said that they would knock the epitaph down, but she built it in Jerusalem Park for the memory of Aqsa Parvez. Let's give Pamela Geller a hand, please. Why I want to do this before I begin and talk about some things is I want to bring a face. I want to bring a face to the victims of Islamic gender apartheid. I want to bring a face to what Islam does to women and to all of its victims. And what happens every time that I do this, I remember I was on a TV show several years ago, and I was trying to bring light to Aqsa and to so many victims of Islamic gender apartheid. And one particular leftist individual said, "Oh, Jamie, not all Muslims do that." And he goes home and sleeps very well. And I don't understand, how does this help to defend future Aqsa Parvezes? How does this come to their defense? The answer is, it does nothing. I never said, and nobody in their right mind said, that all Muslims do this to women. What we are saying is that there are elements in Islamic theology that demonize women and demonize their ability to have self-determination, and those teachings need to be exposed and repudiated. And we're doing this on behalf of Muslims. Fakhra Yunus dared to leave her husband in Pakistan, had acid thrown on her face by him. He was considered a hero in his community, free and at large, protected by Islamic theology. She jumped off a balcony last year in Rome out of depression, and after many attempts at operations, etc. I think that our hearts should go out to the victims and to remember Fakhra Yunus is a victim of Islamic gender apartheid. Shaima Alawadi in California several years ago was found killed in her house. There was a note by her dead body which said, "Get out of this country, you terrorist," or something of that nature. There was a huge campaign on her behalf immediately on Facebook. It was called the 1 Million Hijabs for Shaima Alawadi campaign, because the left believed that she was a victim of a hate crime by those terrible white non-Muslim racists, etc., etc. It turned out to be an honor crime. He was actually discharged and convicted. The campaign died immediately. Nobody cared about Shaima anymore, because the left only cares about women when it serves their ends. They don't care about Shaima Alawadi. Noor Amalekai, murdered by her father in a Phoenix suburb for being too westernized. Isiah Hassan had her head chopped off in Buffalo, New York by her quote-unquote moderate Muslim husband because they were getting a divorce. The Said sisters, Amina and Sarah, honor killing in Texas, here on our own territory. My question is, do we care about these victims and try to stop future victims by confronting and exposing what is inspiring and sanctioning the Muslim murders? Or do we sit back and become afraid because we're going to be called racist every time for trying to stand up for the victims and nothing is done about it? Rudiana Jamail with her son and killer, Salim Israel, who was angry at her for pursuing an attempt to get a divorce. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to start with this because the Soviet regime tried to wipe my father out of existence, the memory out of existence. What totalitarian regimes do all the time is they want to force the victims into historical invisibility. They don't want you to see their faces. They don't want you to know they exist. It is very important that we show the faces of the victims and say the names of the victims of all totalitarian systems, whether they be Nazi, communist, or Sharia. Ladies and gentlemen, my expertise, or what I try to be an expert on, is the left. I've written a book called The Left's Romance with Tyranny and Terror, United in Hate, because what interests me is when I came from the Soviet Union, from that hell, and I grew up thinking about my murdered family members by the KGB and how the Soviet regime had wiped out millions of people in the name of utopia. And I grew up thinking about Mao killing 70 million and Khmer Rouge killing millions. I ran into these professors as I was young that used to come over to my family's house and knew my father, and they always called him a fascist and a racist. And you know these people. They love Castro. They love Mao. They love all these dictators, and I was very interested. Why do they apologize for them? Why do they support them? And after 9/11, when 9/11 happened, I was afraid to leave my house because it was a kind of a leftist community, and I knew what I was going to hear. And when I started watching the demonstrations of the leftist feminists against the Bush's invasion of Iraq and I should say liberation at that time of Iraq and Afghanistan from the Taliban, leftist feminists, remember those demonstrations, were marching with Islamists and Muslims in Muslim garb screaming, Allahu Akbar. And these feminists would be killed within 5 seconds if Sharia law arrived in the United States. And I looked at this death wish, and I decided to document it, and I decided to write this book. And it's about how during the communist era, the left worshipped the entity that will devour them and kill them. And I'm very interested today in this suicidal path that the left is on. But the danger is that these are not just college professors with long beards teaching a few students. They are in power in the White House, and they are in power in the media. And let's talk a little bit about the consequences. These monsters, following Islamic theology, let us stress this. For instance, ISIS right now, collecting the jizya. If you don't get the jizya, you have to either convert or be killed. This is Islamic theology. There's nothing in Islam where there's the teaching that you shouldn't collect the jizya. And what I'm always saying to the defenders, perhaps the gentleman that's here with us this evening, I don't want to speak for him, but many that I know would say, you're taking it out of context. That doesn't represent all of Islam. That's not the real translation. Or that doesn't represent all Muslims. Well, you know what? Your problem isn't with me. Stop getting mad at me that that's happening. Go and confront them. Gather in masses demonstrations with thousands and millions in the streets, denounce ISIS and denounce the theology upon which they are committing their crimes. Don't get mad at the people that are saying that it's in the Quran. Get mad at the people who also see it in the Quran and tell them that they're misunderstanding it and tell them to repudiate those teachings. Obama has allowed this situation. He abandoned Iraq and he handed it over to Al-Qaeda and to the jihadists. And I want to talk about why he did that a little later, but again, the left. It is not a coincidence that the left is in power and that Obama was being told over the last few months that they needed security help. And he knew this and he did not help. Now we have the consequences. The blood is on Obama's hands. A match made in heaven. You would think, you know, when the students were out in the street in Iran in 2009 fighting against Sharia government, Obama didn't defend them. But when people were out in the streets in Egypt against Mubarak, he told Mubarak he has to go. But when Morsi took over, the Muslim Brotherhood took over, he didn't tell Morsi that he had to go when the people were out in the streets, because there is an alliance between Obama on many levels with the Muslim Brotherhood, okay? And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, what is so scary is that in our intelligence manuals now, in the FBI manuals, what has happened is CARE and all the other Muslim Brotherhood front groups approached the administration and said, let us take a look what's in your FBI manuals. We don't like how you mention Islam in here. We don't like how you mention jihad in here. Take all of that out. And the Obama administration listened to the Muslim Brotherhood, and all of the references to Islam, jihad, radical Islam, what have you, have been taken out of our intelligence manuals. Think about this for a minute. Think about during the Cold War, where we're trying to hunt for communist spies, but we're not allowed to think of Marxism. We're not allowed to think of anybody with Russian last names or Eastern European last names. And when we meet them, we can't ask them about communism or their beliefs. Think about what that would have meant during the Cold War. So therefore, use your imagination. The Tsarnaevs, what they perpetrated. The FBI already knew about them, and it even looked into them, but what could it do? It can only ask them whether they like chocolate ice cream or strawberry ice cream, because of the situation now that exists. Eric Holder, as many of you know, after the Holy Land Foundation trial, it was found out that CARE was an unindicted co-conspirator. They were involved with Hamas and with all these events in terms of channeling money to Hamas at the time. Eric Holder never pursued those investigations. John Kerry, a lot to say about this individual, but I will tell you that in early 2014, the Global Counterterrorism Forum, they believe that money is the problem. We just need to start giving more money to these communities and areas. This is all going to end up in terrorists' hands, by the way. But they believe in the Marxist interpretation. They believe that when jihad is perpetrated, that it just means that we just didn't give them enough of the pie. We just give them a bigger share, and they're not going to be interested anymore in what they're doing. So this is why our media does not cover what's happening. When you see those videos, those horrifying videos of what ISIS is doing to the Shia and to all those that they could consider the kafir or the apostates, everything, the media doesn't cover it. You don't see it on MSNBC. You don't see it on CNN because it doesn't fit the Marxist interpretation. The conclusion would have to be that they're waging war. They're waging holy war, and they consider these particular Muslims to be, if not just as bad, worse than the kafir. Let me tell you the situation we're in. There's a former FBI official by the name of John Guandolo who alleges that Brennan, who's the head of the CIA, converted to Islam while serving in an official capacity on behalf of the US and Saudi Arabia. This conversion, according to Guandolo, was, quote, the culmination of a counterintelligence operation against him to recruit him. Maybe it's not true. But wouldn't you think that a nation interested in its own security, while the Islamic world has declared war on us, don't you think that it might even be a good idea to even ask the person, the head of the CIA, what his religion is and what his views exactly are on jihad, and to confront him? I know he's spoken of jihad, and for him it's about the inner struggle. Going to the store more often, or going to the gym, or whatever it is that they try to push on us, that this has got nothing to do with violent jihad. But it's very, very interesting that he has never been asked the question by any media. And this is a very, very serious problem, because these people are the leaders now of the United States. I want to talk a little bit about the denial that we're in now, because what's happening is that an enemy is waging war on us, and we are simply closing our eyes. We are blindfolding ourselves. Our hands are tied behind our back. We cannot defend ourselves. And I'm not speaking about the people in this room necessarily. I'm speaking about the media and the way that the government has now imposed Islamic blasphemy laws where we cannot say the truth about an ideology because the way the left has constructed it is that we're somehow being racist, whereas in fact we're the lovers of all people and trying to fight a totalitarian ideology. Let me give you an example of how this denial works. Anybody know where this happened? Maybe there's so much of this happening that it's not the best question. It would have to be a guess. But it's Kenya's Westgate shopping mall in the capital city of Nairobi. And let me tell you that there was a lot of mutilation that was occurring in that mall during that attack. And what had happened was that we can get into that because mutilation of the infidel is the MO of jihadi terrorists, and it's all embedded in Sharia and has support in Sharia. So that was one indication. Also, of all the things that have come out, these terrorists were asking questions. While the media is saying that they were fanatics and militants and all this stuff, these quote-unquote militants are actually asking very interesting questions. Do you believe in Muhammad? No? Bang. What's the name of Muhammad's mother? Name me this prayer. How do you do this? They were asking all Islamic theological questions. If you answered the question wrong, you were killed. After this terrorist attack in Kenya, Prime Minister David Cameron announced that the attack by the Al-Shabaab jihadists, he didn't use that word, of course, had nothing to do with Islam. It's an indication of what's happening. We see the same thing, for instance, in the Boston massacre, Marathon massacre, where Johar began to actually talk, the inscriptions that he left on the boat, the things he began to say. And Eric Holder sent the Justice Department in there. They gave him the Miranda rights and shut him right up. Because these truths of why we're being attacked is being suffocated. I want to talk a little bit about why the left is doing this, because so many people think, oh, Obama, you see O'Reilly on TV almost every night. Why are they doing this? Why is Obama doing this? Why is Obama doing this? Well, I don't know. Why don't you just invite David Horowitz on the show and he'll tell you in 10 seconds? It's not a mystery. But there's this thing in our culture, in our society where, okay, they're just naive, they mean really well. Oh, Obama doesn't know, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Let me tell you, the left knows exactly what it's doing. It is deliberate, and it is a destructive attempt to destroy this country. And it's not a coincidence that all of this is happening, why the government has taken references to jihad out of its intelligence manuals, why everything that Obama does in foreign policy hurts the interests of the United States rather than helps the interests of the United States, why he's brought it up to a $17 trillion debt rather than trying to get rid of the debt. Let me spend a little bit of time explaining why the left behaves in this way, because this is what I'm particularly interested in. When I was a little boy and all the professors in our area were praising Fidel Castro, and I knew that Fidel Castro would kill them within 5 seconds if they lived in Cuba, I asked my father to explain this to me, and he gave me a book that started my intellectual journey, Paul Hollander, Political Pilgrims. And Hollander explains why the leftists travel to these tyrannies and ultimately many of them get killed there. And it's happening still today. Leftist feminists go to Gaza and get raped by jihadi terrorists, etc. There's this death wish going on among the left, and I want to spend a little bit of time on it. What does this picture represent? The Garden of Eden, the first lie, satanic lie, which is embedded in all these utopian movements. You can be God. Okay, so overall, the belief that has been handed down is that we can all be equal. There is no hierarchy. And we are self-appointed redeemers. We can create heaven on earth. As a Christian, I believe that perfection comes from above. God is perfect. Perfection comes from up there. We don't create perfection. We're fallen. But in the utopian vision of the leftist, of the communist, and also of Sharia, which I will get to, is we will create that paradise here. And so the key, ladies and gentlemen, is we're all the same and we're all equal. And we will create the heaven on earth. And the key is to destroy the old earth and to build the new utopia on its ashes. See, so there has to be a destruction before the new earth is built. So 9/11 makes sense, why the left was so happy when 9/11 happened, and I documented in this book. So what's happening here is building heaven on earth. We build paradise on earth. We're the self-appointed redeemers, and we get to choose who is saved and who is damned. And this explains Khmer Rouge, it explains Mao, it explains Castro, and it explains why the left is on their side and apologize for them and try to deny the crimes of the enemy. Because the left wants to destroy this society. They want to destroy capitalism, and they want to destroy democracy. So when they see a Castro or they see a Mao or they see ISIS, they don't want to talk about that. Because if you admit the evil of Islamic ideology or you admit the evil of ISIS, etc., you might have to accept that democratic capitalism is a good system. You might have to admit that your own society is actually worth protecting and defending. You see, this is anathema now because of how the left has constructed the discourse and the paradigm. This society needs to be destroyed. So they want to deny the evil of our adversaries because they're self-appointed redeemers building a perfect planet. So sameness is also very important in the left, for the left. So this is what's happened now. This is really a tragedy because while we fight for everybody's rights, it's very difficult to say the truth now. I'm approached every day, Jamie, why do you hate Muslims so much? I don't hate Muslims, nor do any people in the counter-jihad movement hate Muslims. We love all Muslim people. We love all people. We fight on their behalf. We're speaking about an ideology and the people that follow that ideology. And there's many, many good Muslims who are quote-unquote good. They don't follow jihad. They don't try to impose Islamic gender apartheid. The key is that they're seen as bad Muslims by Islam. But the way that the left has constructed this is that we are somehow hating people, which is completely false. And so I will tell you that there are many, many moderate, beautiful Muslim people. The problem is that there is no moderate Islam. And this is crucial to get across this message. So overall, ladies and gentlemen, there is a reason why the left is pushing for the destruction of our own society and why it's denying the evil of our enemies. And so what's basically happened is that they've come into power now, and they are able to say to the enemy now, you can come in and further help our destruction. And ladies and gentlemen, if you know the name Mohammed Ali Biari, he's on the Homeland Security Advisory Council, a sympathizer at the least to the Muslim Brotherhood. You should see his tweets and how he's been blaming the massacre of the Coptic Christians on the Christians instead of denouncing the Muslim Brotherhood. But get the pamphlet, the Muslim Brotherhood in the Obama administration by Frank Gaffney. The Muslim Brotherhood has penetrated the White House. It's penetrated our government, and Obama has overseen all of this. This is very dangerous. And I will tell you, SEAL Team 6, for instance, you know the assassination of SEAL Team 6, right? We don't know all the answers, but I will tell you, it's not hard to find where our best people are when you have infiltrators in the US government that are connected to these evil forces. Hillary Clinton had Huma Abedin on her right-hand side as Deputy Chief of Staff. Her father was Huma Abedin, her father Muslim Brotherhood, her mother Muslim Brotherhood. Huma worked for a Muslim Brotherhood organization for 12 years. Why are no questions asked? And the problem is that out of 535 members of Congress, only 5, led by Michelle Bachmann, a hero, led an investigation or wanted an investigation. So this is the problem that we're in. Let me start concluding a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. For those that think that this is not a problem and that the left does not cause any problems. I am going to fight the left till the day I die. It is a pernicious, evil force and vicious, pernicious idea. And it's personal to me, very personal, because they are murderers of my people and complicit with the murders of my people. Let's talk about the left and some of the things that they've perpetrated. What is this picture of? Ladies and gentlemen, the fall of Saigon, the fall of Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, the anti-war movement, Jane Fonda, Tom Hayden, all of them. Oh, they were so concerned about the Vietnamese people. Fall of Saigon, the re-education camps that were set up, the death camps, the boat people in the South Pacific. It led to what was predicted as the domino theory. Laos fell, Cambodia fell. The Khmer Rouge took power in Cambodia, killed 1/4, 1/3 of the population. And guess what? The North Vietnamese came forward and said, thank you, anti-war movement. It's because of you that we won. And Jane Fonda and the rest of the crew has blood on their hands for what happened to the Vietnamese people and the people in Indochina. Ayatollah Khomeini, the killing fields of Khomeini in Iran. He killed more people in 2 weeks than the Shah did, his whole regime. And how did Khomeini come into power and cripple American security interests and embolden Muslim Islamic jihad everywhere? Because Jimmy Carter, with his belief that you should punish America's friends first and reach your hands out to his enemies. And as you know, Carter's even on Hamas's side till this day. But because of Jimmy Carter pulling the rug from under the feet of the Shah, Khomeini took power. And ladies and gentlemen, that means a lot in so many ways in terms of how many lives it cost and how it crippled freedom throughout the world. Zacarias Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker, as you all know. Do you know that a month before 9/11, FBI got a hold of his laptop? And inside of his laptop was information about the Hamburg cell, Al-Qaeda Hamburg cell, that had all the information about 9/11. All they needed to do was to get into that laptop and they would have discovered the plot of 9/11. But they couldn't get into the laptop because of Janet Reno and her law, the wall of separation that was made in the 90s that prevented intelligence and criminal investigations and enforcement agencies to communicate with one another. A leftist administration and a leftist ruling prevented us discovering what happened in the plot of 9/11, and we know, use your common sense of what that could have prevented. Let me tell you a little bit about, I'm almost done. Let me tell you that I was on Hannity I think maybe a month and a half ago, and I said to one particular individual that was denying Islam's role in jihad, and I said, your hands are drenched in the blood of the victims of Islam. And there was a particular individual that called me a disgusting person on the show. And I can be slandered for saying such a thing with all this BS going around. Let me tell you what I mean. The Holocaust denial enables the Holocaust. Gulag denial enables the Gulag. If you want to engage in jihad denial and engage in what's causing jihad, you are complicit and your hands are drenched in the blood of the victims of jihad. Because you're creating an atmosphere in which we can't get to the root of the problem and to stop attacks and to stop what's happening. So I'll give you an example. Who's this individual? This guy is in the U.S. Army lecturing in the U.S. Army. His lectures involve, unbelievers should have acid poured down their throats, and he's quoting the Quran and Islamic teachings, and infidels need to be killed, and the kafir needs to have acid poured down their throat. Nobody complained. Nothing was done, because everyone was saying, well, I don't want to be called a racist. I don't want to be called an Islamophobe. Because the rule in the Obama administration, we know the rules in terms of the suffocation of free speech, etc. And so because of that climate, because of this jihad denial that prevails in our culture and in the administration and in the army, he went on to kill 13 Americans and to wound 39 Americans. And who has blood on their hands? Is it just Nidal Hassan? I beg to differ. That's why our denial is so dangerous. Same with the Tsarnaev's Boston Marathon massacre. Could have easily been prevented if the FBI was allowed to do its job and was allowed to think about jihad and jihadist connections. Let me end on a positive note or a hopeful note of all of this that we're facing. And what is it that we can do to confront the left? First of all, we have to battle the denial in our culture. Does anybody know this particular individual? His name is Natan Sharansky. He was a political prisoner in the Soviet Union for many years. And here he was exchanged, and he's with the Israeli government here. Let me just end on these last two notes of where our heart has to be, of where, despite all the slanders against me and people like me, who we have to be. When Sharansky was held in prison for many years, he was held in a very cold isolation cell. He received and dealt with many, many torments by the KGB. And he was finally released. He was exchanged. He won his freedom. And many years later, he became a minister in the Israeli government. And they visited the Soviet Union. And they visited the Lubyanka prison where he was held. He made it part of his itinerary. And he was there with his wife Avital, and they were there, and he said to the Soviet officials, "Excuse me, do you mind taking me to the isolation cells where I was held?" And the KGB was very nervous, and they were on their phones, and they took him, and they said, "Oh, here you go, here's the isolation cells." He said, "No, that's okay. Let me show you where the isolation cells are." And he went to a very cold basement on the bottom floor, and they walked into a little cold, damp little room where he was held, and they all came in there. And he said, "Excuse me, can everybody leave me and my wife alone in here for a second?" And it was just him and Avital, and he said to her, "Does this place look familiar to you? Because you were with me here every day for more than a decade." And she said to him, "It looks very familiar." What I want to leave with you, ladies and gentlemen, today is Hebrews 13:3. Remember those in prison as though you were in prison with them, and suffering as though they were suffering. We also know that in John 15:13, no love hath greater a man than to lay down his life for his friend. So we retain our humanity under all of these circumstances and conditions. And no matter what we are called, we remain firm and strong, and we remain our dignity in standing for all suffering people, for the Christians, for the Jews, but I stress also for Muslim girls and Muslim dissidents and all Muslim people who are the victims of Sharia and Islamic jihad, and not to let their slanders disillusion us or to stop us from our battle. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.